Today we'll talk about the environmental problem in economic development. The environmental problems such as air pollution, water pollution, and so on can be interpreted as negative externalities or the problem of the commons or problem of common resources. I explain those concepts. First, the usual kind of interpretation, negative externality interpretation. The environmental problems can be viewed as negative externalities caused by economic activities, such as air pollution or noise produced by production activities. However, these negative externalities are not taken into account in the market. So here's the demand supply analysis for production activity producing the environmental problem. Here is the demand curve, here is the supply curve, and even though firms are producing the pollutants like greenhouse gas emissions, they are not bearing any costs. So this is just private marginal cost. That's a supply curve. Here is the demand equals supply point. That's market equilibrium, output equilibrium out level here. But from the social point of view, the social cost is higher than the private cost because of the negative externalities. Pollution affects the people's health or the other economic activities or even global climate. Therefore, that kind of negative effect should be added to calculate the social marginal cost, which is higher than the private cost. So including the negative externalities, social marginal cost will look like that, which is higher than this private marginal cost. So this is the point giving the socially optimal output level here at the intersection of the demand curve and the social marginal cost curve. Because beyond, up until this point, benefit exceeds the social cost. But beyond this point, social cost will exceed the benefit. So this is a social loss. Even though there is a private benefit here, but from social point of view there's a loss. So if output in the market is here, this total area is a total loss for the society, which is called the dead weight loss, which is a kind of measure of inefficiency in the market. That's so the market fails to achieve efficiency, market failure in other words. Then what to do in this situation? And we know that the so-called environmental policies include tax or regulate economic activities like a production or output or the pollutants, the greenhouse gas emissions, for example, to make equilibrium output equal to a socially optimal output level, and thus eliminating dead weight loss to achieve efficiency. So this tax or regulation are the typical environmental policies. So back to this graph, this difference should be the number of tax to be imposed on this production activity, and including tax, private marginal cost will be equal to the social marginal cost. This difference is the tax, which will be taken into consideration by firms and producers. So here is the market equilibrium as well as the socially optimal output level here. if you put this in the context of economic development, you can say this: as the economy develops, there will be and there should be tighter regulations, higher taxes, or more stricter regulation on the amount of pollutants or the greenhouse gas emissions. Because as income rises, the rapidly rising value of and demand for environmental goods will result, because environmental goods are so-called luxuries. Luxuries will increase more than proportionately as income increases after satisfying necessary needs. So the clean water, clean air, nice sceneries, and so on are luxuries whose values are increasing rapidly as income increases. So there should be tighter regulations necessary to achieve socio-optimal. In other words, again back to this graph, the socio-marginal cost includes the subjective evaluation of the cost. So as people become more aware of the environment, socio-marginal cost will increase. This is perceived value of social cost. However, these days the environmental problems, most typically air pollution, become a global issue, literally affecting the world. Therefore, we take an alternative view or approach, that is the problem of the commons or common resources. Definition of the commons or common resources is such that the good has these two properties: non-excludability and congestibility. This means non-excludability means no one can be excluded from consuming this good, like air, water. It's technically impossible to regulate people's use of air and water and so on. Also, they are congestible. The highways and roads are the best example. If people use the good too much at the same time, they're congested. Air, if too many people use air will be polluted. So that's a kind of congestion. Water, the same. So if we have these two properties, we will have a so-called tragedy of the commons. Story goes something like in a village, people raise cows, and if too many cows eat too much grass in the common place, common ground, all the grass is gone and roots are all eaten up and grass cannot be replenished. So cows will have nothing to eat and they will die, and that's the tragedy. If number of cows and the amount of grass eaten are regulated to a reasonable level, then grass will be replenished and cows will be grown to at the reasonable the level or growth rate. That's the story which we can apply in the game theoretical situations. Like in the case of global warming, there are a lot of countries involved in regulating greenhouse gas emissions. Now, each country has two options. One, to regulate their economic activities to reduce emissions, or not to regulate. Country B has the same options. Now, if they get together to regulate the pollutants or the greenhouse gas emissions, they will both benefit by maintaining the reasonable level of air quality, and they both benefit. If they don't regulate, neither regulates, then they will be polluted and affecting the global climate, and that's bad for both countries, so that's minus. Then it seems obvious that they should get together to cooperate in regulation. However, in the real world, this kind of agreement is hard to come by. In the case of climate change, the Kyoto Protocol has been the only agreement reached in the past, but that essentially expired. So now new regulation is under discussion, with not yet yielding any concrete result. Why this agreement is difficult? Although comparing these solutions, it's obvious to see the better one compared to this one, right? The reason is, if country faces this situation, this country tends to choose this strategy, not to regulate, regardless of other countries' strategy. Because if other country regulates, country A will find it more advantageous not to regulate. Because if this is just benefit one, okay, if the other country regulates to maintain the nice air, then country A should free ride to use air without regulation. So there's no cost borne by country A, so the benefit is greater. The same for country B. Country B tends to choose this strategy, that is, not to regulate, regardless of the country A's the strategy, because country A will prefer not to regulate. If country A regulates, then all the costs will be borne by country A, and country B can free ride. And even though country A does not regulate, country B will find it more advantageous, because if country A takes up all the cleanup job, cost will be enormous. So it's better to avoid this, and then settle down here with the solution. So the result is the tragedy of the commons. That is the prisoner dilemma solution. In the real world, all countries recognize the importance of the cooperation. So they get together every year to attend the United Nations Climate Change Conference. And hopefully next year in Paris, there should be some agreement to replace or to continue the Kyoto Protocol. The difficulty is that even though all countries recognize this solution is better, the way to bear the cost or share the burden in regulating industries depends on the negotiations or powers each country has. So it could be not one, but 0.5 versus 1.5, or 0.1 to 1.9, depending on the power politics. It's a problem of income distribution within this efficient solution. So that's the difficulty in dealing with the global issue like pollution problem.